Janelle, will you take roll, please?
Durst. Elkin.
Here.
Engelhardt.
Here.
Gartner.
Here.
Cupis.
Here.
Melby.
Here.
Westland. Here.
All right, the next item is the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Tim? I'll second.
Second, Melvin, Keeler, second. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. All right, we are jumping right into election of board president. So I will now open the floor for nominations of board president. Are there any nominations?
I'd like to nominate Kent Elkin.
Nomination for Kent Elkin.
Second?
Second for Kent Elkin. Any other nominations for board president? Seeing none? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I need to get a motion.
Sorry, I need to get a motion. Can I get a motion for President Elkin?
I make
The
such a
nomination
motion.
of Elkin as president?
I'll make such a motion.
Second?
Motion second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries. All right, so with that, what am I doing that?
I don't need to
Stay.
go.
Thank you.
Swing it across.
To the next election of officers there, President Elkin.
Well, thank you, I think.
A lot of work, a lot of fun there.
well-
Mr. Elkin.
Be patient. We'll move along here then. The next office up for election would be the office of vice president. Do we have a motion for vice president?
I nominate Tim. I'll second that one.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other nominations? Okay. All in favor?
We have to have a motion.
Can I have a motion
Oh.
to elect?
Okay. Motion to elect Tim Cufis as board vice president.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
All right, moving along, board treasurer. Would you entertain a motion for board treasurer?
I'd like to nominate Greg Gardner.
We have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. And we have to call, we have a motion and a second. so-
Nomination, yeah.
Nomination, that's what it
Yes.
is. All right, I'll call for a nomination of Tim Cufis as board, Greg Gardner as board treasurer.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, and board clerk. Entertain a motion for nominations for board clerk.
I'd like to nominate Marilyn Durst.
Okay,
I'll nominate Ben Engelhardt, excuse me, sorry.
okay. Two nominations. Do we have a second on either?
Give a second to the first nomination.
Okay. Do we have a second on the second nomination?
I'll give a second to the second nomination too.
Okay. Now, if I understand this right, we need to deal with the first nomination first, and then go to the second nomination,
Or you could do a roll call vote is,
and then
choose.
right, and then you do multiples to, okay. Okay. Okay, I'll do a roll call vote for, Durst, for clerk. Want to call the roll, Janelle?
Yep. Durst is not here. Elkin.
Yes.
Engelhardt.
No.
Gartner.
Yes.
Cupis.
Yes.
Melby.
Yes.
Westland.
No.
Okay. So we have enough votes, so we need a nomination for Durst for clerk. Do we have a nomination?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, do we have to roll call this too?
For
For the nomination?
second one.
No, I mean, because we had enough votes on the first, for Durst the first time around.
Yeah, 4 out
Oh.
of 7.
Yeah.
You have 4 out of
So you
7.
still have to vote, you have to vote for the position though yet.
No, you're
This
voting.
is actually
No,
voting for the
correct.
position.
Position.
We were only voting for,
The nomination.
The
Nomination
nomination.
first, now we're voting for, yes, the position of clerk. Okay. So we had a motion and a second, or nomination and a second. We need to do roll call or just?
I think so.
Okay. You want to call the roll, Janelle?
They give us flexibility there, but it's just
Yep.
transparency. I think it's easier to hear and we can document.
Okay,
Durst is not here. Elkin,
yes.
Engelhardt,
No.
Gartner,
yes.
Cufus,
Yes.
Melby,
Yes.
Westland.
No.
Okay, with that, we are through our officers. Next is board appointments. This would be for representatives to WASB and CISA 11. It says appointment, but it's a nomination process, isn't it? Same thing?
Yeah, we have, and again, little background on that if you want to just share. So Christie and some of these committees, but
Yeah, so Tim, you could speak a little bit to the WASB representative portion. You've been doing that for the last year?
Yeah, it's basically just keeping the board in the loop if there's any significant information coming out of the Wisconsin Association of School Boards.
a lot of information's been flowing from WASB. They're ramping up their communication and just, it just seems like there's a lot. So it's just kind of, yeah, keeping the board informed, and if there's anything important or relevant, it would be, yeah, doing that duty.
Are there meetings, Tim, that you have to go to?
No,
No.
no. I did go to the state, I have been to the state convention.
State,
Yeah.
sometimes we hit the state convention, breakouts and.
And I'll speak to the CISA 11. I've been there up the last couple of years. CISA, it's the cluster we're in. The headquarters is based in Turtle Lake. As far as being the representative, there's an annual meeting that you should attend. There is an option to run for the board of control, which is the board within the group of CISA. I have not chosen to do that. It actually comes up on, you're based in clusters of 7 or 8 clusters in our district, or in our CISA district. And then your school name kind of comes up, that if you want to be in part of the board of control. But as far as there's one meeting a year. Just try to stay informed. If something comes up that's worthy of,
They offer other meetings, there's opportunities, sometimes just seem, depending on what the board, any topics or anything, sometimes something of interest might come, but
Could you,
annual meeting.
I mean, we use services from them too?
Yep, we
Could
get
you cover
services.
what they're, I mean, WASB is one thing, but what we actually, they help us with certain things.
So
and
many
stuff, yeah.
different things, so we have we've actually narrowed that down, trying to save costs and so on, but they do things for student services, and it's kind of this consortium and ways to be efficient with resources, and again, smaller districts and different things, so we're sitting in a pretty good spot being a larger district and having a lot of the staffing and coaching and support. That's a little bit different, but I know Trevor has presented there. They do the legal seminars. It's great when they bring in local legislators, and come in and provide information and questions. But it really is, again, another system of support. And again, we contract for services. It's just a variety of things that they help with, a lot of the state grants and different things that we have to write. So.
And do we use some transportation things with them too, to transport some kids that have to go to the other schools and things? Or
I don't.
are we doing that all independently now?
I
or-
think that's more independent now.
Okay.
And, again, we're just set up a little bit differently than some of these, there's a lot of conversations with these smaller districts and condensing and pooling resources and transportation. I mean, there's a lot of conversations with declining enrollment and so on, but
Yeah.
we're in pretty good shape with our transportation and our services there. But I know the list is long, and we have we've narrowed that because we were spending money and, thinking we were getting some good use out of it. But we found different ways to meet our needs here and just have more of a narrow focus and support from CISA.
And where are the meetings held?
They're in Turtle Lake.
Turtle Lake,
Yeah, there's a CISA has their own building up
They
there.
have a building.
yep,
Not a school.
it's right near the casino.
There's a lot of smaller schools in our district, in our CISA.
39
So it's,
districts. Yeah.
other than us and Hudson and Menominee, is River Falls in there?
River Falls.
They're in there. Otherwise, it's a lot of small.
Yep, a lot of Unity and a lot of the, yeah, smaller districts in their Amory.
Clear Lake Pudding, yeah. So, it's not a huge time commitment.
It's not, yeah, it's one of those lots of meetings, but, so,
But I always thought it was, you can learn about the whole
yeah, the whole
process
system.
of the whole system,
Yeah.
how it works, which is kind of valuable from years and years back
Right.
and stuff, so, yeah.
Okay, with that, I would entertain a motion or a nomination for a WASB representative.
Kent Elkin, or I'm sorry, Tim Kufis.
Do we have a second?
Second.
The first and a second. Do we need a nomination for this one?
Yeah.
Let's be
It's the same.
consistent. Yeah, we're trying
Okay.
to, we're going by,
Okay.
that's why we're ramping up in books. We want to,
Okay, so then a
Related
nomination
that?
for
Yeah.
Tim Kufis as WASB representative. Do I have a nomination?
I'll make that nomination.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
We don't need to do roll, do we?
no,
Okay, aye. Okay.
this is,
You're okay with this, Tim?
Thank you again.
thank you. I know it's like, what if I don't want to be nominated?
Yes.
And just to put it out there, CISA, I've done it for a couple of years. I wouldn't be heartbroken if somebody else wanted to take over the CISA rep part of it, so. So with that, I would ask for a nomination for a CISA representative.
I'll nominate Christie for the CISA representative.
Okay. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. First and second, nomination for Christy Westland as our CISA 11 representative.
I'll make that nomination.
And a second? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. We made it through. Next thing is the annual training for board members. We've done this the last quite a few years. It's a good refresher. I know I always learn new stuff because new stuff is always coming up. I don't know if you all had a chance to review quite a bit of information that was sent out. I don't, if anybody has any discussion about that, otherwise I think we're going to move to Trevor in our board governance training. He's going to lead us through that process. So,
Thanks. Did you want to start with any of the policies? Did anybody have any questions on any of the policies? I know we've kind of had this as two different, a review and discussion of board policies and then the board governance training. So not sure if anybody had any of those or wanted to speak to those first.
I would like to have you talk about public expression of board members.
Okay. Yeah, so basically you've got your policies that talk about what the expectations are of each of the members who are here. And so basically what this is you put together this policy, you have this in place in order to make it clear who's speaking. Because when you become board members, you don't lose your First Amendment rights of free speech just because you're a board member. However, there's a difference between speaking as a personal individual and speaking as a board member. And so it is really important to ensure that when you're speaking, on topics that might be coming in front of the board, that you are very clear that I'm speaking as an individual today, or I've been authorized by the board to speak on behalf of the board about this topic. And so that's really what this policy is meant to outline. It talks about in what roles and what responsibilities we're going to be speaking, who's speaking on behalf of the board, and also to protect your own First Amendment rights as an individual. And so with all of these policies, it's important to remember too that these are your own ways that you self-govern. You guys have set up these policies, you guys can change these policies. And these are really intended for you to be able to say, this is how we are going to function, this is how we are going to behave as board members. kind of setting up your code of conduct, the way that you want to function as an organization. And again, these are kind of your self-governance about how you guys want to, as a board, interact, how you want to behave. Conflicts of interest we'll talk about once we get into the training as well. Board member anti-harassment, that's another one it's important to just be aware of. And then kind of along with that, the board member behavior communications code of conduct. It all really talks about professionalism and making sure that we are that we're behaving in a professional manner towards each other, and that this is how you want to function. And honestly, you put these in place. These are how good boards function, by these kinds of following all of your own rules, making sure that you are doing things like, it might seem like overkill that we're going through and absolutely making sure that we've crossed every T and dotted every I with our nominations process and all that. But it's a part of your own self-governance to ensure good government. So unless anybody had any more on the policies, I thought I'd just kind of get into the governance and legal refresher training. And I think a couple of things before we get started with this. I want this to be as helpful as possible to you guys. Several of you have heard this, probably multiple times from me. Christy, I know you haven't. So if you or anybody has questions about it, wants to talk more about something, wants more detail, please feel free to stop me and ask. I want this to be as helpful as possible for you guys. Also, you'll have, there's some materials that you can have that'll just kind of be like a reference guide that you can look back at, if you kind of have questions as you look at this or think about this later on. But without further ado, talk a little bit about your obligations. So, obligations of board members. What are your roles and responsibilities? Is that
not pulling up?
I have a different view.
Oh.
I changed the view,
Okay.
and I don't know why it's not changing on the board.
It just looks a little easier to follow.
Do you want to see if you can figure it out?
No.
Because this is the presenter view.
Yep, and I changed it to the other view that should display.
A lot of times when you have multiples, it does the one.
There it is.
There you go.
I can
Did
see
it.
it a little better. Yep.
So to start with, your oath of office. Every board member has to take an oath to support the constitutions of the state of Wisconsin and the United States, and to faithfully discharge the duties of the office. That has to be taken. That oath has to be done before you can be seated. Everyone has taken that oath, and so it's always important to remember as a foundational element of what is a responsibility of a board member is that you have an oath to uphold the Constitution of the state of Wisconsin and the United States at all times in your roles, in your responsibilities. You also have a number of statutory obligations. Wisconsin statutes, section 19.013, requires board members to perform their duties to the best of their abilities, to not engage in any act forbidden by law, and to faithfully perform your duties, among other things that are outlined in that statute. You also have fiduciary obligations. You are a public fiduciary for the people who you represent, and you owe a duty of loyalty to the district over any considerations of private interest, and have to avoid conflicts of interest and maintain confidentiality. And we'll talk about that as we get to that point as well. And what I always think is interesting is talking about the roles that school board members have. You have a number of different roles that you might play depending on what you're talking about that day. And it's actually, you kind of hit all branches of government as a school board, and it's a unique situation to be in because you often have a legislative role when you're adopting policies and budgets. You're essentially legislating for the people who are going to be going to your schools. You have a judicial role when you conduct things like expulsion hearings or other types of hearings in front of this board. Now you're kind of serving as like the judge in that kind of a scenario. And then you also have a bit of an executive role as well when you're hiring, supervising, and evaluating your one employee that you guys evaluate, which is your superintendent. So the board has to kind of wear a lot of hats and has to be able to do a lot of these things depending on what you're going to have in front of you. And one of the most important things, frankly, if you don't remember anything else from what we talk about today, I want to really underline the open meeting law. The open meeting law talks about and sets the requirements for everything that you guys do as a board. And there's the public policy underlying the open meetings law is really the idea of government in the sunshine. Everybody gets to see what you're doing. Everybody gets to hear what you're talking about. Members of the public get to come in and watch. They get to see the deliberative process. They get to be a part of that deliberative process. And so that's really kind of where the open meeting law comes from and what it's there for, is ensuring that that the public is entitled to the fullest and most complete information regarding the affairs of government. So when we talk about what this means for us, it is the general requirement is every meeting of the governmental body has to be preceded by notice. And so what does that mean? Essentially, it means that when you were talking about a meeting, we look at both statute and case law to determine what these things mean and what this means. And the term meeting has been defined to mean the convening of members of the body for the purpose of exercising the responsibilities, authority, powers, or duties delegated to the body. So essentially, courts have taken that statutory definition, and they have said that a meeting occurs whenever members convene for the purpose of conducting governmental business and a sufficient number of members are present to determine the body's course of action. So essentially, governmental business means discussion, decision, or information gathering. So any time that you get together as a body to gather information, to discuss items, to talk about things that might come before the board, that is a meeting, and you have to have sufficient number. So generally, that's going to be a quorum. So a quorum of you can't get together to talk about something that's going to come before the board, or to be gathering information on something that's going to come before the board, unless you give notice. Unless you give notice of that meeting, because that would be considered a meeting. So it kind of trips people up sometimes too when you think about things like, well, we wouldn't typically think of that as a school board meeting, but for instance, attending another body's meeting. So if a quorum of the board went to the city council meeting to hear what they were talking about on an issue that might have some kind of impact on the board, if you have a quorum there, you're information gathering. You are at a meeting. There's a quorum of you there. That's a meeting. So a lot of times in these kinds of situations, we'll do like a joint notice, where the city and the school board have a notice saying that we're both holding a meeting at the same time and place. So that would allow you to do that, but that trips people up. They sometimes forget that, oh yeah, that's actually a meeting too, and we would be in violation of the open meeting law if we don't give the notice that that's going to occur. The other big area where this comes up in kind of today is serial meetings and walking quorums. And so depending on the facts, a serial communication between board members can constitute a meeting under the open meeting law and violate the open meeting law. So essentially, if you have a series of gatherings of one or more members, and ultimately the idea is to talk about topics that are going to come before the board, that would be considered a walking quorum. That would be a violation of the open meeting law unless that was noticed. So what does that mean in practice? What it means is that you can't go from one board member to the next to say, here's how I want to vote on an issue. This is what I want to talk about on it. I want you to think about this. How are you going to vote on it? And kind of going down the line to get to a quorum to have that discussion. That would be a way that walking quorum has been determined to be a violation of the open meeting law, because it essentially is trying to get around the idea of government in sunshine. That if you're having that discussion as a board, you're doing that here. You're doing that so everybody out there can see it. And so walking quorums can absolutely, be a problem. But I do want to underline, though, that this doesn't necessarily mean that you guys aren't going to talk to each other about anything having to do with board business or anything having to do with the district's business. Because there is a long tradition in our country of elected officials talking to each other about topics, working together to think through ideas. The problem is, and where it can become a problem with the law, is if a quorum or more of you are doing it. Or, these two meet over here, and then these two meet over here, and then they get together and they say, well, this is what the two of us were thinking, what are the two of you thinking? Now you have a quorum that's discussing it. That violates the open meeting law. And so it's really important to remember that, and it's also very important to remember that these serial meetings, the cases really came around before we started having email, and now email and text have made this infinitely more difficult because essentially those emails and texts where you're communicating between board members, again, depending on the number of officials that are on that email, can 100% violate the open meeting law. And so we have to be very, very cautious with using email, with responding to emails that the whole board is on, and there are kind of some best practices to do around this area, but I really want to underline this because this is probably the toughest thing for boards to deal with, is especially when your emails are all public. You guys are going to be on dozens and dozens of emails where you're all on it, and someone's asking you to take action. Someone's asking you to do something. And so you really have to remember that one of the big problems for boards is responding to that, having everybody on it, talking about a topic that's going to come before you with a quorum of the board on it violates the open meeting law, and that can absolutely get you in a lot of trouble. So the risk of inadvertent violation is taken down quite a bit when you guys know that you'll just have kind of one-way communications. And so this could be your superintendent sending a one-way communication to all of you saying, here's something that you need to be aware of, here's information. Sometimes when I send school boards emails, I put them all on the BCC line, so no one can accidentally hit reply all. Because hitting reply all and talking about it, again, could violate the open meeting law. If a board member, ultimately wanted to share information, wanted to respond to this type of thing, the worry would be, again, the idea is that you are having that conversation in the meeting. That if you want to share your opinion on something with the rest of the board, you do it at a meeting when there's an agenda item on the topic. And sending those kind of emails, or even responding to emails that you get from community members, from students, from staff members, can absolutely get you guys in a bunch of trouble. So the other thing to remember too is when we're talking, it's not really open meeting law related, but when we're talking about board member emails and board member communications, if you're sending a board member communication, anything having to do with the board, that's almost certainly going to be government data that then has to be maintained and would potentially have to be turned over to anybody who asked for it. And so that could include if you were sending something to a parent was making a complaint about something their student dealt with, and then you forwarded that on to a staff member. That would be data about which that child is the subject. That child can ask for a copy of it and can get a copy of it. Now, not everybody off the street could necessarily do that because there might be privacy interests for that student. So not anybody off the street could see it, but that student would have a right to get that. Or we might have to redact it and then give it to anybody else off the street. So you have to be really cautious, especially with emails, especially with text messages, that it is one of your fiduciary obligations to the organization to make sure that you are saving those, to make sure that you are turning those over if data is requested, if we get a data request, something that everybody has to do. I know that's a lot on open meeting law and specifically emails, text messages. Does anybody have questions?
Yeah, so Trevor, that has come up here, and again, our practice has been, right, we get the board, and then I'm sometimes CC'd or not, and if I'm not, it technically has come from, the president would send me a note or send the individual, thank you for letting us know this information is turned over to our superintendent and so on, but again, there's this icky feel for board members that are like, oh, this is really important, they write all this stuff, and can't we just say, hey, thank you, or do you have any guidance
Yeah.
there? Because that has been brought up, and it doesn't feel good sometimes that people then don't think you care, or how come this isn't, the board doesn't
Yep.
say this is urgent, we gotta get on it, but guidance
Yeah.
there, and again, my practice has been, I immediately get on it at the highest level, say, I'm responding on behalf of the board, this is a great concern, I will, follow our policy to, and all those things, but that has come up here where, so any other guidance there?
Yeah, and I think what I would say is, that's probably one of the things that I hear the most complaints about from board members is, I want to be able to respond to somebody. I want to be able to tell them I've heard you, that, we're doing all these things, that, we'll look into this, all those kinds of things. And as much as I understand the instinct and wanting to be able to be responding, we have to be really cautious about the open meeting law in any of those types of responses. So for instance, if the full board and you got an email that said, this is what's happening at the elementary school, I want somebody to take care of it. And then a board member replied all, and said, yeah, we absolutely have to take care of this because blah, 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 here's what I think about it. Well, now we have a quorum of the board talking about a topic in email that might come before the board at some point, and that's a violation of the open meeting law. And so the kind of trade-off, and what I've worked with a number of districts to do, is you guys just have this expectation, and you guys talk about it. You figure out how you want to handle this, but that the board chair is going to respond on behalf of the board. Nobody else is going to respond, or we're going to send it to the superintendent to respond, and no board members are going to respond. And then with so many of these, they aren't necessarily board issues. It's not a board topic, not something for you guys to take action on. If appropriate, then your superintendent brings it back to you. And one of the real concerns with a lot of those things is remember your roles and responsibilities. And we'll talk about this when we get to the idea of maintaining the chain of command. A lot of times you might be the final arbiter. You might be the judge in a decision that comes in a month or two. And so if you had a bunch of emails on a topic, you responded on a topic, you might lose your, you might lose the appearance that you aren't biased. You might not be able to be in that decision. So let's use the student expulsion as an example. We get an email from a parent saying, my kid got beat up at school today, what are you going to do about this? You respond and say, yeah, that kid is real trouble. He's been bullying my kid for weeks and weeks. Totally, let's do something about this. Then that kid comes to you for an expulsion 2 weeks from now, and you're doing an expulsion hearing. You have, number one, received information that wasn't presented at the expulsion hearing, and number two, you've already taken a position on this issue. And so we have now created an appealable decision for that family if that student is expelled, where now they can say, well, look, this board member who made the decision, they were biased against me. They had prejudged. They had information and they relied on information that was not presented at the expulsion hearing. So that's a huge thing to keep in mind, especially because you guys know this, I know this, but you don't really have that much to do with student stuff. You really don't. And a bunch of parents think that you do. And people in the community think that you do. And so that can be really tough, especially when it's, this awful thing's happening to this kid. I really want to respond. I really want to say something. I think at most, what you would want to do there as an individual board member is respond individually, where you're not including everybody else, where you can say, I'm passing it on to the superintendent. You should talk to your principal. Here's the appropriate person for you to go to. But the far better, in my mind, as someone who defends school districts, is that you just have a plan and you just know. And everybody who comes in, the answer is when you send something to the full board, either the board chair or the superintendent's going to respond. Nobody else is. But again, I know that is one of the things that boards struggle with everywhere.
I have a question.
Yeah.
If you put something on the email, you try to erase it, you can't erase those things, right? Because it's there, it's a matter of record.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I mean, one of the problems too is, first of all, our servers maintain it, so we've got it. Even if you delete it from an inbox, it's in our servers, you know, so really, there's not really a way for you to delete your stuff. You know, you say, oh crap, I violated the open meeting law. You can't just delete it away. And so it really is something on the front end you have to kind of be really cautious about and make sure that you're taken super seriously, because, and we'll talk about it in a minute, like some of the things that can happen are pretty serious.
Even
The records
even
request.
deleted, they can recover it.
Yeah,
So-
and the records requests are nonstop. It's all we do, months and months, and we can't charge for anything, and it's the new thing. Every single 3 months on 11,000 redactions, Janelle was trying to get done, and it's unbelievable. So everything now, everyone's asking for everything, and you're right, nothing's deleted, and it's been nonstop crazy. So just trying to, you know, I want to protect the board and.
Wouldn't be like that if we didn't have asinine policies with the bathroom.
I have a question on the text messages. So Troy uses it on occasion for just real quick little, there was an incident at Hillside Playground, you know, student will be fine, whatever, just a small thing. So that's great. A lot of times, you know, we'll do a thumbs up or received or just kind of, should we even not do that? Or what level?
Is that a full group email
Yeah.
or text?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, best case would be not, that it's a one-way communication.
When you do the emoji, that goes to everyone, doesn't
It
it?
does.
Yeah.
Yeah, so everyone would see that. Arguably, just sending an emoji would be like, to me, that says message received.
Yeah.
So
That's
I
usually
think,
people say.
I think the argument would be that's not really giving my opinion, that's not really sharing information. I think you'd have a pretty strong argument to say that's not a violation of the open meeting law, as opposed to saying, well, here's why I think we should do this or shouldn't do that. So likely not a problem, but probably best practice not to.
And I could see like in a big city, that would be crucial to have a rule like that or something, but I don't see it working in a small town like this. You can pass the rule, but that doesn't mean everyone's gonna abide by it. Because, you know these families and stuff, they're not gonna just take you not responding, they'll come to your house, you know?
Got it, but even this text, so that's always been one of my main things, is just, they don't want to, it's such a small town, they don't want to hear from their neighbor, the grocery store. I'm just trying to give them, because everyone's on the scanner, the police, we're trying to just say, hey, and I just basically, hey, keep it high level, you know, at a medical situation here, just letting everyone know, and it's usually, I usually get thumbs up or just receive, just so they know, but.
Just a thank you is all.
And I think we've asked this
Yeah.
3 years ago, and it was, yeah, we should be fine, and we're not providing that, but it is, I wanted them, that's been one of my jobs. Anytime I'm always like, Janelle, you know, everything is make
Yep.
sure the board hears first from us, and it's always my first text, is just wanted to keep you in the loop. And then if I need to go back, or if it does need to come onto a board meeting
Yep.
agenda, we obviously do that and make sure the public and everyone knows, but it's been our practice to, you know, because everyone's telling, and if it, you know, they're board members, and I tell them I don't know and what's going on, at least they can say, yep.
So you really don't think that we should be able to just send an individual email back saying, hey, I got your message, thanks for the information?
That would be about the most that I would say.
Because there's no way I'm gonna not respond to somebody. Yeah, I will do it individually, I'm not gonna reply all. But man, that's crazy to not acknowledge somebody, like that would piss me off as a parent to
Totally.
not have been heard.
Totally. 100%. And to your point, you guys are you're a pretty big district. Much smaller districts than you do this exact same thing. And it's, you know, like I tell the story about my grandpa, the board chair, and how people were coming up to him, talking to him all the time. And just 100% it's gonna happen. You are going to do yourself a lot of favors if you start saying, thanks for the information, you should talk to the principal. Thanks for the information, talk to the superintendent. Because then you don't have to get into all of that. You don't have to say like, because
Well, I'm not
Exactly.
saying that we would do that. I'm
Yeah.
just saying, I wanna at least say,
Acknowledge.
hey, I got it,
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Other than the fact that you guys can decide as a group, yes, we are going to do that, and the safest way to do it is to just have one person. So just know that anybody who emails is going to get a response. And so you could 100% do that, so it's not like you're then ignoring them. You know that your chair, for instance, is going to respond. But what happens, and what I see happen, and the kind of the problems that become are, you say that, and then they say, well, I told you about the bullying that was happening. Why didn't you individually do anything, board member? And you're like, well, I said, I'm sorry that's happening. I sent the email saying we've received the information, but I didn't mean that I agreed with you or that I was the right person for this. And so then you can get in kind of this spiral where it's even worse with the parent. And now the parent's saying, how can you say thank you for me sending your email, but then you didn't do anything about it? You sent the email back to me, but then you didn't do anything. So it is kind of one of those things where if we could shift it so that, especially when we're talking, and it's so much of it is students. So much of it is students that really isn't anything that you guys can do anything about. If they know, if they've gotten a response, and then the superintendent or principal has followed up with them, they're not going to come back to you and say, wait a minute, why didn't you send me an email when I got calls from the principal and superintendent? But then, yeah, you're pumping gas, you're at the grocery store, someone's going to say, hey, I've got this issue. That's going to happen no matter what. And there's nothing you can do there.
The last couple months, I've been getting a lot of my emails, it was only sent to me. You know, it wasn't addressed to the board. So you just let them sit there hanging, you know, it does, because they do know you in town and they will say something, so you know, you feel obligated.
Yeah, and I totally get that, and I think you also, we talked a little bit about you don't give up your First Amendment rights, but you also don't give up your humanity. You're still a human being. You live in the community. You're with these people.
Especially
You don't
those
have
of
to.
us that grew up here just 10 years ago, the Richmond was a completely different
Yeah,
place.
yeah.
And 10 years before that, I mean, everyone knew everyone. So,
Yeah.
I know it's a big district now, but the people that live here are not, and they
And
haven't changed.
And my thing is, Trevor, I want to protect the board and all of this, I like your example there because the word of mouth and all the inaccurate information and whatnot, and if people are sharing inaccurate information about board members, I'm just super sensitive to that, to all of our staff, but anything that we can do, because that's the conversation with all superintendents right now is the scrutiny in public, and if you do or don't do, and whatever, and board members, and so any guidance there, because I feel like that's my job too, to protect
Yeah.
our board members, and, the scrutiny, it's unbelievable. Our support staff, people complain, twist things all day long.
Yeah, and a lot of the really frustrating pieces are that, especially social media, those types of things, most of the time we know that that's not true, that the stuff that's out there is not true, but people are believing it and saying, how can you let this happen? That type of thing. You're never going to be able to combat the social media. You're never going to be able to keep up with all of the lies, all of the slander, all that type of stuff. And it also stinks for you guys because you are elected officials. And to some extent, you are supposed to be able to take on a lot of that. You're supposed to be able to kind of say, yeah, you get to say whatever you want about me because I'm an elected official. And so think about the way that we have national discourse around our politicians. It's a smaller scale, but it's the same way for you. And so, I think about, some of the worst things that I've seen put out there about board members, and it's pretty sad. You say, I can't believe someone would say that about another human being, but at the end of the day, there isn't much that this body as a whole is going to be able to do about it.
That's what I've never heard it, so it doesn't even.
That's the way to go.
See it.
Other questions on those topics?
I know I had a thing several years ago. My neighbor's child was in a big problem. I didn't know it, but they ended up in, we don't know who was going to be in the expulsion. They said, oh, he's in big trouble and done this. And I sat down at the thing and then in walked that family. And so I immediately recused myself and just walked out because I didn't want to be involved either way. I just said, I'm sorry, I can't
Yeah.
be involved with this one at all because lots of times, I mean, we know who's here, but we don't have, but that was one where they had come and really complained to me and I didn't know it was even going to be an expulsion hearing, so.
And I mean, that's a good reminder about like, and we'll talk about it in a minute, conflicts of interest. If you feel like somebody's going to be, saying, well, that's not fair, what are you doing here, making that kind of decision, you can always recuse yourself and just say, I'm not going to take part in this. I don't want anybody to be able to claim that I was biased, that I had some kind of a personal interest in this. Because again, the whole idea is that we are responsive to our electorate and we are representing them. We don't want our electorate to not trust us because they say, well, this person had this conflict over here and maybe this person is connected to that contractor that you just approved. What's going on? So those types of things are going to erode the trust that you have in your community. And so it's really important to try to avoid those kinds of conflicts. I always mention this because again, I get to talk about my grandpa, the board member. Chance social gatherings are not meetings. And so this is we had one restaurant in our town, and if we were going out for dinner, he'd look around the restaurant and he'd see two other board members and he'd walk out. He'd say, I can't eat here tonight. And it's like, well, I guess someone's cooking because there's no other restaurant in town. Chance social gatherings, you see each other out and about. Those are not meetings, so not a violation. Don't take that as some sort of license to try to say, hey, do you just want to by chance meet me at the bar and then we'll all talk about it, or a chance meeting or that type of thing. But be aware of that's not a meeting.
With all the lawfare that's going to be coming this way, maybe we could have a policy where we have one email, we don't have individual emails, and then it's addressed by the chair. We can all still see it, but there's just one email for every, just an idea.
Yeah.
Be more manageable. Something to think about anyway.
Yeah, something for you guys to consider. You guys don't do your notice, but I've got information in here in case you have questions about how the notice goes out, what has to be in a public notice. What's important for you guys to know is that what's on your public notice of your meeting is what you're talking about that night. You don't have a lot of ability to expand it or to talk about a lot more things at that meeting because it wasn't posted on that public notice. However, it's important to talk about one option that you have here. Oh geez, I had a lot of this. I'm really behind, sorry. That during the period of public comment, so if you're going to have a public comment section where people can come and talk about whatever they want to talk about, the board can discuss any matter that's raised in the public comment. However, the Wisconsin Attorney General basically says that your discussion should be kept to a minimum and you should defer any kind of deliberation or action until a future meeting where you've given notice so that people can say, oh, I know they're going to talk about this, I know they're going to consider it. It can be really hard in a public comment meeting to not just want to say, oh yeah, we all agree with that, let's do it. But for instance, you might not have the background. You might not know that what they're talking about isn't exactly accurate. You would want your administration to come in and give you an update, put it on a future agenda, that type of thing, so that we can have a full discussion where people have had time. Because the other thing too is, a lot of times you guys do prep for meetings, where you read ahead of time so you know what you're thinking and you've thought about it and you want to come and have a discussion about it. You can't necessarily do that if it's in the public comment period. And again, the AG's office basically says that you should, you can talk about it, but you shouldn't vote on it that night. Again, how to post the notice, you guys probably don't need to know all that much about that. I've got information in the materials if you want to look at it. You want to keep your materials together. And then another thing that comes up is closed meetings. Upon the appropriate motion and notice, you can have a closed meeting, which is one of the very few exceptions to the idea of government in the sunshine. And this is where there is a topic that, for one of the stated reasons outlined in the law, they say this is one of the trade-offs. You have to be public, you have to have your discussions in public, unless you're talking about one of these 8 or 9 things. And so those are, I'm just going to hit on a couple of the big ones. The big ones are when you're deliberating about a case as a quasi-judicial hearing. So if you're holding an expulsion hearing or a hearing for a termination, those types of things, then you can have it in a closed meeting. Considering dismissal, demotion, licensing, or discipline of a school district employee or an investigation. So if you're looking into discipline or thinking about some sort of discipline against a public employee. If you're conferring with legal counsel who's rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy with respect to litigation, or the other one that you probably do the most of the time is contracts. You're considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation of data about employees as part of contracts. And so, as a general rule, no member can be excluded from any meeting of the body, including a closed session. The board has the authority to invite who it wants to invite into closed session. So quite often you're going to be meeting in closed session and you're going to have your administration there to present evidence to you or to present information to you. And board members have the absolute duty to maintain the confidentiality of what's discussed at the closed session. The stuff that you talk about at a closed session can't be shared outside the walls, can't be talked about with spouses, with people in the community, those types of things, has to be kept confidential. Mm-hmm. And so the violation of this fiduciary duty is what's considered malfeasance of office. And again, not to scare you, but just to give you the reminder that these things are very serious because it is a potential felony. So you could go to jail for violating these types of things. Your fiduciary duty is to the board, and it is a class 1 felony that is punishable by a fine of not to exceed $10,000 or imprisonment not to exceed 3 years or both if you intentionally fail or refuse to perform a known mandatory, non-discretionary ministerial duty of your office of employment. In your official capacity, you act in a way that is in excess of your lawful authority or that you know is forbidden by law, or you exercise a discretionary power in a manner inconsistent with the duties of your office. So yeah.
Can I get a copy of that sent to my wife?
Yeah. Tell her this is why I can't talk to you.
I love it that I have that on her, but she hates that I won't tell her about the closed session.
That's good.
Troy, you talk to her.
I know.
So send that over to her for me.
I will do that.
So examples of the type of thing that can get you guys in trouble: providing any private or confidential information to the plaintiff in a lawsuit against the district, disclosing confidential information regarding board discussions in a closed session, disclosing confidential information to a reporter, indicating to a contractor that you have the authority to enter into a contract on behalf of the district unless the board has given you that authority, or obtaining the services of a contractor on behalf of the board without the authority to do so. Signing a contract might be that type of thing as well. And so, I talked a couple of times there about kind of private or confidential information. The attorney-client privilege is something that's held by the board as a whole. So you as an individual board member don't have the authority to waive the attorney-client privilege or to share that information. The board as a whole has that right. And it's also important to remember that a number of things that happen in closed session are potentially discoverable in litigation. So if there's a lawsuit about something that you had a closed session on, that's the type of thing that lawyers will often fight to say, I want to know what was said in that closed session. I want you to, I want you to release that so that we can see it. So just be aware of that as well, as that what's in, court might order us to share what we discussed in closed session to go out there. And so, again, as just to just underline that, that under the open meeting law as well, so we talked about the kind of the malfeasance of office idea, the class 1 felony. Violations of the open meeting law as well are punishable by a fine, and the actions that you take at any type of a meeting where there was an open meeting law violation may be void, meaning any contracts that you entered into, any other kind of actions that you took that night might be void. So it is pretty serious. Just got to make sure that that's always kind of in the back of our mind when we're thinking about talking about or discussing what we're going to be talking at a meeting. Just again, I know I said this earlier, I'm going to underline it. If you don't remember anything else, remember that you have your discussions and your deliberations here. That when you're in this spot right here, this is where you guys talk about it, not outside, not something that you're doing over email, that type of thing.
I have a question, Trevor. So, if you were ever accused of something like this, who's responsible to represent you? Are you personally responsible for that?
So it would depend a little bit on the circumstances,
Yes.
because you obviously have insurance.
Yes.
And you have a duty to defend and indemnify board officers. And anyone who's on the board gets their defense paid for by insurance. Unless it is acting outside the course and scope of their duties, which a violation of the open meeting law would be. And so your insurance company might say, we're not defending that. We're not paying for a defense for that. That is on the person individually. It's not 100% clear exactly how that would come out, but I wouldn't want to be the one to find out. Because I have 100% seen insurance companies say, I'm not defending that. I'm not paying your defense for that. And then the district's in a bind because it's like, well, if you acted outside the course and scope of your duties, the board might say, we're also not paying for that. And then you're on your own. Let's just not get into that situation. Other open meeting law questions, just generally before I talk a little bit about roles and responsibilities.
I have a closed session question. What are the responsibilities or abilities of board members virtually during closed session? Can they attend? Can they vote? What is?
Yeah.
Is there a law or is it like an AG opinion? I guess kind of the whole.
Yeah, so attending virtually, there's nothing that prevents that. There's no law that says that you can't attend a closed session virtually. I generally advise against it. I don't think it's a great idea, especially if you are talking about serving in your in your quasi-judicial role. If you are at an expulsion hearing, for instance. Because then you aren't necessarily face to face. You might not be hearing all the same things. Someone might try to make that argument, but at the end of the day, that is allowed. You can absolutely attend the closed sessions virtually. You would want to ensure that that you are in a private enclosed space, that nobody else can hear that conversation, those types of things. But at the end of the day, that is something that's allowed.
And then voting during closed session?
Voting would be the same thing.
Okay.
That you could, if you were legally in attendance, you could legally vote.
Mine's open, but kind of to virtual. It's been brought to my attention that we're like one of the few school districts around here that don't televise our meetings. Is there some legal ramifications, like if we do have potential lawsuits? Maybe it might look better if we start doing that or something. What are your thoughts on that?
There's no legal requirement to do it.
I know there's not a legal requirement.
And so
It looks really weird though that we're the only ones who don't.
I've seen it both ways. And
13 of the 39 districts in the CISA do it.
Do it.
So most don't. But
Yeah.
it is that question, whatever the board
Well,
wants to do.
I'm talking locally.
Oh,
One
yeah.
of the few that doesn't.
Yes.
So.
And I'd say that that's a board decision to make. You guys get to decide that. There are some benefits and downsides that come when you are doing, when you're doing like the live broadcast of your meeting, and then you have it on your website. Because what happens if someone comes in and shares private educational data on a student? Well, then you probably have to go back and bleep that out. You have to try and fix that from the record because that has to be redacted before anybody can see it. So, and I will tell you, this is something that a lot of boards struggle with. And I have seen a number of different kind of ways to try to get around some of those. So for instance, there are some districts that say, we're going to televise the board meeting, but we're not going to televise public comment. Or we're going to televise the action items, but we're not going to televise the discussion items. Or work sessions aren't going to go up there, but our regular meetings are actually taking action on. So ultimately, I think it's up to you. There isn't necessarily a legal right or wrong. I think that's a political question.
We gotta do something, because the people definitely want it, and I've been hearing about it ever since, even before the bathroom thing, ever since I won this election. How come you're the only one who does it? That's like the number one question I hear, so.
Yeah.
I would say for those people who are interested, they should be here at the meetings.
Well, it's not possible for everyone, some of them have jobs.
But our meetings start, at 6 o'clock.
Well,
How many people work
A lot of
after
people
6?
don't work 9 to 5 anymore.
Or they have sports, or, music.
After school care,
After
my
school
wife does
activities in
after
general.
school care, she does there's all kinds of reasons why the moms can't make it.
Most of those things don't happen on a Monday.
I'm just saying,
We're here in a
this is what the people are telling me.
People
So
will
we should
use that
listen.
information against you. That happened to me. They said I was sleeping at a meeting and I was sick, but I wasn't sleeping. Someone put that up. I mean, they lie.
Well,
For their
if
benefit.
the whole meeting had been recorded, then they would have been easily to prove you weren't sleeping. So it could work both ways.
So what I would say is you guys can absolutely talk about this at a future meeting, about what you guys want to do, because ultimately it is your call on what you do.
Yeah.
You are obviously not the only one that doesn't
Well,
do
like you
it.
were saying, shed light on government we are a government thing, and
Yep.
I think it's the right thing to do, and the people want it.
And I think you guys can absolutely talk about that at a future meeting about how you guys want to decide that, because that's your call.
We all
You as a
have all
board
the
get to.
equipment. I mean, it's kind of, and they know we have the equipment, so it's like, you guys have it all. It's just really hard for me to come up with an answer.
Yeah, I think it's a good future meeting item,
Yeah.
and then we could bring in
Heard it.
the pros, cons,
Yep.
so we can
Work
have a
through it,
deep dive.
decide,
and
we'll do whatever. I've been in both.
Because we need to.
Whatever you wanna do.
I can, I have two comments here. One, when I'm at the city council, or on the video, when I'm here, I'm personally, it would be okay with me. Okay. But I did want to make a comment on the city. The city will not allow you to zoom into closed meetings.
Yeah.
They won't allow you to zoom into closed meetings, and we do, and that follows exactly, that's the decision for the city council to do that down there. And we do, so it's
And you do
just
by-
like the videos, yeah.
So you do by policy, and you guys can make that call on that. The one thing that I would say is there is a state statute that says that you cannot keep a board member out of a closed session.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if you guys kind of came up with that as a group and said, this is our expectation, we're just not gonna, and you got a big push on it, you might have a little bit of a problem.
Yeah.
But I think if that was something that the full board wanted to do, you can absolutely talk about it.
Again, for me, I follow what the board's decision is on either location. It's fine with me either way. Just to show that right in this town, it's done two different ways, so. Yeah.
So, I think that I want to talk a little bit about kind of roles, responsibilities, and duties, because I think it's really helpful to remember a couple of things as we kind of get ready with this new year of board work, is that ultimately you are the entity that is responsible for the school district. You are the ones that make the big calls about, the property and the affairs of the school district. And the school board may do all things reasonable to promote the cause of education, establishing, providing, and improving programs, functions, activities for the benefits of students. That's straight from statute. That's your responsibility as the board. You have this policy 144.5 on board member behavior and code of conduct that ultimately is there to remind you that you act as a board. You as an individual board member have almost no authority. Your authority only comes from being here and being one vote at a board. Outside of that, you don't have any real individual authority just because you are a board member. And it is your responsibility. You are taking on the well-being and care and keeping of the district. And so, it talks a little bit in your policies about what the general expectations of board members are, including attending meetings, being familiar with and following the laws, being familiar with and complying with board policies, conducting yourself with integrity, honesty, and in a manner that reflects positively on the board, being accountable for policy and decision-making, high levels of honesty, credibility, truthfulness in all matters dealt with by the board, treating each other with respect and dignity at all times, maintaining decorum. Essentially, it's exactly what you might think, that you guys want to hold yourselves to a high standard. You want to say, this is what we're going to be, this is how we want to work with each other and work for our district. And so I would suggest that you read that 144.5 if you haven't yet, because that's going to be really, really helpful to remember. I've got information in here about complaints, because sometimes we can get complaints about board members, about violations of the code of conduct, that they can be brought and they can be investigated by the district, by the vice president and the president to review the complaint and determine what to do and how to respond. The president may need to contact district's legal counsel for support. Upon completion of the investigation, if the conclusion is that a board member violated a policy, they have to brief the board. So you have these policies, you have these expectations of each other, and then you also have these procedures for people to raise complaints and say this person is violating this policy. They aren't maintaining their code of conduct. And ultimately, it's also important for you guys to remember that as a board, the only individuals who really can do anything to you guys, can have any kind of discipline or anything like that, is you as a body. Superintendent can't discipline board members. An individual, the board president can't discipline board members. Only you as a body can do that. And so remember that you are ultimately responsible to each other, and you are responsible for each other as a board. Things that can happen if you're curious about discipline, I would almost never suggest any kind of board member discipline because it makes everybody look bad. We look bad to the community. But in case you were curious about it, things like a censure. You can do a resolution censuring board members for their conduct. You can remove from committee assignments. You can restrict board member rights granted by policy, including requesting items for a board meeting agenda, referring to have the board member removed for cause as well as something that you can do, but you don't have the authority as a board to remove a board member. You can simply refer them for potential removal or referral to law enforcement. But again, let's not ever even talk about those things. Just good for your own background knowledge, why it's important that you guys are up to speed on and why you are following all of your obligations. And what I like to say about your role is you as a board, you are responsible for all the big things. So macromanagement, not micromanagement. You are big picture. You're setting the roadmap, saying this is where we're going to go.
I came anyway.
How fast did you drive, Carolyn?
I don't drive.
You want anything to drink before I get started again? Do you want a water or anything?
I'm fine.
I can grab it.
I'll probably get some.
Okay.
If you need something, just let me know.
So we're talking right now, just to bring you up to speed, we're talking about kind of roles and responsibilities of the board. And we're talking about how the board is really responsible for setting the roadmap. You guys make the decision on overall budget, organizational structure, positions, policies, operations, hiring and firing, and salary and benefits. And then the kind of day-to-day stuff is going to be your superintendent. You have one employee as a board, your superintendent. You don't have any other employees that are your direct reports or that you have any kind of authority or role regarding. You give your superintendent the authority to do these things on your behalf. Things like selecting and assigning personnel, supervising, evaluating personnel, directing compliance with directives, enforcing rules, transferring, disciplining, making recommendations to the board, and basically add in there basically anything having to do with students. So you guys set the roadmap, your administration gets you there. You are thinking 5 years down the line, he's thinking day to day. That's really the division and the way, the way that you work with the things that you are responsible for as a board. I know that can be difficult, and I know that sometimes our own staff don't understand that. They might say, well, why isn't the board taking action on this issue? I'm mad about the way that this teacher treated my child in class, or this teacher, whatever other complaint you can potentially consider there. But remember, when you go back to that, the kind of day-to-day stuff that's happening in a school, it's not really within your role. It's not really within your responsibility. You're thinking much, much bigger term. You're thinking long-term, you're thinking policies, structures, those types of things. That's your role as a board. And then you turn it over to your administration to kind of handle that the day-to-day. And it's important too to remember that the board acts as a body, not through individual members. Again, your authority comes from the actions that you take in this place, in these meetings. It's important to remember, by your own policies, you have this language about not undermining board actions after the meeting is over, because the board speaks with one voice. You take an action at a meeting, you vote on it, it's over. You aren't going out to the community and undermining that or taking actions that would negatively impact that. Now, under your Robert's rules, there might be times when you can vote to reconsider an issue, or something might change where you might, then all of a sudden you bring it back to the board to decide. But once you vote as a board, it's over. Now, you don't give up your individual First Amendment rights, of course, but as a board, we don't take action to undermine the action that we've taken as a board. The vote is over, we speak with one voice moving forward. It's also important, we've talked about it a lot, but it's important to remember to follow the proper chain of command. Kind of again, on those roles and responsibilities, you set the roadmap, your administration follows the map and gets you to your destination. The proper chain of command is going to be really important in this, as you might imagine. This is where boards get tripped up. This is where we start getting issues. This is where we start getting problems, is when board members don't follow the proper chain of command. So this could be things like responding to concerns and citizen complaints, responding to anonymous complaints, and those types of things. And what you want to do, your role as a board in these, is to document the complaint, pass it to the administration, and let them handle it, and then it will come back to you if it is a board issue. So those kinds of, just think about it again, I'll just underline it again. It's the day-to-day stuff. It's the, I'm mad about my teacher, this student's bullying my student, this is happening over here. I don't like the way this road is designed, it's dangerous. All those kinds of things that come to you. Ultimately, what you do is you pass them on to administration to handle and respond. And your expectation is that your administration is taking care of those. If you want more information on that, if you want that to come to the board, then you'd have those kinds of discussions. You would say, I think this is a board issue, I think we should put this on a future agenda, those types of things. Or frankly, your superintendent's gonna tell you that. Yeah, this is something I'd really like a board take on because this is more of a board issue, more of a policy as opposed to a governance kind of issue as opposed to a day-to-day type of thing. So it's important for a number of reasons, but just kind of to talk about why it's important to follow that proper chain of contact and chain of command, to kind of be the first line of defense on those. Number one, you guys aren't properly trained to do investigations, and if you start asking around and asking questions of people, you might get the district in a lot of potential legal liability. You might ask an illegal question that you're not supposed to ask. you might impede an investigation that's already going on. So if our principal is interviewing students about a student disciplinary issue, we already have an investigation going on. Having a board member come in and try to start asking questions of people can harm that and can impede the investigation that's already going on. You might not know the full story. You might not know the background. So the example of this is a parent says, I asked for this on my student's IEP and they're saying no, and I don't really understand why. It's a really reasonable request. You might even look at that and say, well, that is kind of a reasonable request to be put on the IEP. Why wouldn't they do that? So I'm gonna go start asking questions. Well, you might not have the background that there is a full prior written notice giving all the legal reasons why the administration turned down a specific request for an IEP. And so you might not have that background, you might not know what's happening with respect to the issue. It also could be the type of thing that it's changing. They are granting this accommodation, so now jumping in at the last minute is just going to lead to a lot of confusion. We often place, the other thing that's important to remember too is we often put our employees in really untenable situations. I know I mentioned that sometimes members of the public don't understand board roles and responsibilities. Sometimes our own staff members don't. And so they might feel like, well, why is my boss coming in and talking to me? What are they doing in the classroom? Why are they in here to try and ask me questions? And might not understand that you don't really have that role. You don't really have that responsibility. You really aren't their boss. And again, you start to go in and start asking employees questions, you're potentially stepping on their legal rights as well. That you didn't give them the proper notices prior to asking questions that could lead to discipline, all those kinds of headaches that you don't want to have to deal with. It's also outside your authority, because again, where's your authority? It's here. Your authority comes from the body. You don't have the authority to go out and start asking questions, following up on parent complaints, staff member complaints. Other things that you should not do. I know we talked a lot about how we're going to respond to those parents and what we're going to say. To the extent you're talking to people who are raising complaints to you, don't pick sides. Don't promise a particular outcome. Don't promise confidentiality, because we can't necessarily promise confidentiality. You don't do the investigation yourself. You don't act outside the process or act as the decision maker. You wait for that to come back to the board. You don't offer to personally address the concern, and you don't go directly to employees below the superintendent. And if you do those things, you're going to keep yourself out of a lot of headaches. You're going to keep yourself out of a lot of problems. I have a few hypothetical scenarios here. I feel like I kind of stepped on a couple of them by using the example, but I'm going to do at least a couple to give you an opportunity to kind of read it, think about how you might respond, and then we'll talk about it. So number one, you're on the board. Two high school students, Ed and John, get into a fight at school. John is your neighbor's son and is a model student. Fight begins when Ed, an EBD student, sucker punches John in the face. John throws 3 punches and knocks Ed unconscious. John is subsequently suspended from school and is arrested. Meanwhile, Ed is taken to the hospital in an ambulance. Following day, your neighbor approaches you and begins telling you about the fight between John and Ed. Your neighbor then asks whether you think it was appropriate for the principal to suspend John and whether the district will be seeking to expel either John or Ed. How would you respond in this scenario? Sounds like one of you has experience with this exact situation, which maybe is where I built this from. I don't remember where I got this one from.
You weren't here,
No.
you weren't a lawyer at the time. Well, I mean, I know what I would do, but
What would you do?
I would just say, talk to your principal, talk to their, and then when it got to that point, if it actually got to that point, I would leave the room.
Yeah, and I think that brings up a lot of the problems. Is first of all, as a board member, none of this is really your role. None of this is your responsibility. This is all a student issue. That's a day-to-day issue for administration. And then at the end there, I mean, we have a potential that this might come before you. This might come before you as an expulsion. If it's an EBD student, probably not, because that's probably a manifestation of their disability, but it potentially could. And so this is the type of thing where 100%, how do you respond? Hey, listen, I really can't talk to you about it. I'm sorry you're going through that, but you got to talk to your principal, got to talk to the superintendent. Not something I can talk to you about as a board member. That kind of thing is probably the best way to respond.
I tell them to call a lawyer, self-defense is a right.
So what I would say is, it's a great idea.
This actually happened to me and we went to court for 2 years.
But remember that you have a fiduciary obligation to the district and to act in the district's best interest. So telling someone to go get a lawyer and sue the district is probably not going to be in the
I didn't
district's
say
best
that, I
interest.
just said go talk to a lawyer.
Yeah. So what I would say is I'd be a little bit cautious, and I understand we're joking in here.
I wasn't the aggressor.
Yeah.
And I still got expelled for 2 weeks. My dad was not having that.
Yeah.
And we took him to court for 2 years and we ended up winning, so.
And what I would say is, I think even, and it just brings up a good point. That sucks that you had to go through that, but like, even if we think that we're joking sometimes, out in the community and these kinds of things, I'd be really cautious, because say that you did that. Let's say,
Because they had a no tolerance
Yeah.
policy, so they said they were just
yeah. So, but
enforcing their policy.
let's say though that you told your neighbor, like,
Yeah,
let's,
none of that happened. But yeah.
and let's even take it a step further. Let's say you say, I can't believe that happened. I cannot believe that you're dealing with that. That is BS. Call a lawyer because you are going to win. And I'm not saying you would say that.
Yeah.
But if you said that, now you've acted outside your role as a board member. Are you speaking as a board member or as an individual? Do you have the best interests of the district in mind? And so is that the kind of thing that maybe your fellow board members could say you violated the code of conduct? Yeah, potentially. So it's a no-win situation when you're put in that kind of a spot.
Can you preface it and say, I can't speak to it as a board member, but as a parent, this is how I handle it? Can you say something like that?
I've had to do that a few times.
Because you're saying, I'm doing it as myself, this is how I would handle it as myself, as a parent.
Yeah, I think we are drawing very fine distinctions there about your fiduciary obligations and what is the best interest of the district. I think
Especially if you're a student in the district, then it's really a great.
And it's really
one
tough.
thing if you don't have any kids there, but now,
Yeah.
so you're gonna have an opinion.
Yeah.
And
so
I've been in that spot before where I've had to say, I'm not as a board member, but personally, I'm with you on it, but I have no idea how the board's gonna do. I don't
Yeah.
speak for them.
And so what I would say is if you do that, you have to be very cautious then about any kind of interaction in that situation moving forward. Even if you said, I can't speak to you about it as a board member, but if that were me, if that were my kid, I'd get a lawyer, I'd sue him, 100%. So now this comes back to you as an expulsion. Now you have told the parent that, and we're sitting in this room and they say, wait a minute, you just voted against me, but you said that you would get a lawyer and fight it. So I think that it can feel better in the moment to maybe give your personal opinion about those things, and we might argue that you have the right to do that. But what's in the best interest of the district? Probably not doing that. And the reason why is because it could come back to bite us later on. That this board member told me this. They said, well, yeah, they said it wasn't in their board role, but they told me this. They said I should get a lawyer. They said I should fight this. They said they'd be mad as hell. All those kinds of things. You have to be really cautious about those kinds of things. But again, you didn't lose your First Amendment rights as an individual by becoming a board member.
Well, kind of sounds like you do too.
Well, now, do you want to put the district in the best position possible?
No, absolutely. I understand that.
Yeah.
I wholeheartedly understand that. But I would like to be able to have some sort of autonomy and say, that sucks. As a parent, I feel for you. I want to be able to talk to somebody and, and not be like, nope, can't do that.
And the best interest of the district can mean different things to different people. Like you think we're following the laws, you're just doing your job. I get it with the bathroom things, but a lot of other people don't think that following that policy is the best interest of our district, even if it is following the law. So that can be interpreted differently by different people, I think. Of course, you can already know that in your position.
You're gonna get a sore tongue in this position, because you bite it a lot.
It's pain.
You have a natural reaction that you want to say something.
You can't,
it's
it's terrible.
You just can't.
It's the hardest thing.
It's really hard.
And you'll get the opposite. You'll get people mad at you, and you want to, shoot back.
Right.
You can't.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially let's use the example of your superintendent has been keeping you in the loop, so you do know something about a student incident that happened. You know the identity of people who did it. And then you go out and you share that. And you say like, no, and by accident, you accidentally use the kid's name. Well, now you violated FERPA. Now you violated the Wisconsin Data Practices Law. So I mean, it really stinks. This is a wonderful position for lots of reasons. I'd never do it, but I'm glad that you guys are doing it, because this is a wonderful position for a lot of reasons. You have so much control over 5 years from now. What happens with the district? What do we want our policies to be? But you can also get in so much trouble, and you can get the district in so much trouble by just doing what you think is like, well, I felt bad. I wanted to say, I would do that in this situation, and now we're in a situation where now we're being sued for something, or now they're saying we're gonna appeal an expulsion because of something that someone said to me. So again, you don't lose your First Amendment rights, but it might just be the type of thing where you're gonna shift a little bit how you talk to them, and saying like, I hear you, I understand your concerns, that's fine. But then like going the next step and saying, as a parent, I might do this or that, and not to pick on you, but just like kind of using that, because I love getting actual examples, because otherwise you're just hearing my examples. But like use that as your thought process on where could this possibly go depending on what I say. And it's
So
just
you're gonna find you're gonna lose a lot of friends if you use that attitude. They're not gonna like you.
Okay.
It was one of in my first few meetings of learning this, I went to the WASP meeting about this first week I was in. I went down and went to a WASP meeting about all the things you're talking about. And it seemed kind of odd to me. And I think the hardest thing to accept was the fact that people in the public perceive you as an individual as having some real power. But you have absolutely no power. You have absolutely no power. The only thing that has power is if the people with you vote. And then the decision is done. And then the thing also was, when you walk out, yes, you may have voted, you may be the only person that voted negative on it, but you have to walk out, and when someone says, you say, the board's decision is done. And you just have, that's it. And you just have to swallow that, and those two items, as a position you're in right now, that was many years ago for me, was very, I just didn't like that, because you just don't have any power. You have zero power without the rest of the board, and then accepting when it's done, it's done. The meeting is done, it's over, the vote's taken, move on.
Yeah.
Nobody knows that more than me.
And that actually, I love it when people do this too.
Yeah.
They bring me right into the next one that I wanted to talk
Yes.
about. Let's use this one. So you're a member of the board. Board votes to require students to observe a moment of silence at the start of each day. You and another board member vote against the motion because you believe it may make some students feel uncomfortable if they see other students bowing their heads in prayer during that moment of silence. The remaining members of the board vote in favor of the motion. After the meeting is over, the other board members who voted against the motion asks you to join him in trying to get hundreds of residents to sign a petition asking the board to reconsider the issue. How should you respond here? How do we feel about this one?
Well, the thing is, you shouldn't do anything. It's over. If the community wants to do it, that's fine, and they should do that, but for a board member, it's over. The decision
It's
is made.
pointless to say anything it's over, but you can tell the community.
Yeah.
And I think the real difficulty here, and obviously I write these so that they are hard, so they're not easy. Because there's no good discussion if they're easy.
That sounds like a walking open meeting.
It potentially does. And the other thing is, how in the world are you ever going to be able to separate in the mind of the people you're talking about? Well, I'm not talking as a board member. I'm talking as an individual. Well, you were one of the ones that voted on it. So this is, it's going to be really hard to draw that distinction and for people to actually understand it, such that they don't start saying, well, you got this board member who's out here trying to organize a petition against the district. Even if you say, hey, I'm doing this as my personal, I'm wearing a shirt that says this is my personal opinion, this is my personal time, not as a board member. it's going to be really hard for people to understand that and to draw that distinction, and can absolutely lead to problems. So again, but you do not give up your First Amendment rights. You can say, I don't agree with this. In my individual capacity, I don't agree with this. But taking that next step and taking action is probably where you're going to start saying, that's probably violating your own internal policies and procedures. Let's see. I think I had one more that I wanted to do. I just want to make sure. Okay, this is a good example. So another board member sends you an email complaining about a particular student's misconduct at school. You reply by email and state that you have the same complaints and concerns based on your own child's experiences with the student and based on the fact that the board was contemplating expelling the student the previous year. You also state in your reply email that the student is not really to blame. You explain that the real problem is the parents, lack of intellect and parenting skills. You jokingly conclude your email by saying, I guess the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. What concerns would you have if this scenario occurred? Can you alleviate those concerns by deleting the email? And what happens if the parents request a copy of this email? I lied. I said that I don't do easy ones. This is an easy one. This is 100% an easy one. You have 100%, you can't be a part of any of those conversations moving forward. If there's an expulsion, you're out. You can't be a part of it. Yes, the parents get this. The parents can see what you said about their kid. No, just deleting it isn't going to do anything. It's not going to help anybody. And I will tell you, I say this to staff members all the time, and I try to remind them, remember that what you put in email is a record. It's a government record that now we potentially have to turn over. I cannot tell you how many parents make data requests for emails about their kids, and then you read them and you're like, ooh, that's gonna be bad when the parent reads that one. Like they use a mean nickname about the kid. They do, they start complaining about the parents. So it just you have to remember that this is government data. We are creating data on individuals, and it is the type of thing that would potentially go over. And so I don't know. I'd say don't use email at all. If you can, that'd be great. If you're one of those people, it's like, I'm only on the phone. I get emails and I'm on the phone. That's it. I mean, that would be the easiest, but I also realize in this day and age, it doesn't work that way. It's not really possible.
What about personal emails? Like you're using your Gmail account?
So if you're using your Gmail account or you're using your personal cell phone, so the easy thing is when it's on your official school district account, easy. You don't have to do anything. We get a data request for it, we own it. The district can look through it, can have IT run that. If you're doing it on your personal devices and it's about board business or anything having to do with the district, that's also government data. So you have to gather it and turn it over. Technically, you are supposed to be maintaining it. You're supposed to be holding it and making sure that it's maintained for the periods that you have in your policies. Same with text messages. And so ultimately, that is something that's all government data too. And we have to turn all that.
Phones, right? Because even our administrators are like, I'm gonna use my private, you can have 10 phones. In the end, you've shared with us that people requested.
Yep.
They can get it.
Yep. And this happens where we have to gather data and turn it over.
It's just been
Happens all the time.
non-stop records. It's overwhelming. Every superintendent, I mean, I don't know how many hours and hours of.
And I don't know how many of these national ones.
It's been unbelievable.
So what we have, to keep you in the loop on some of the stuff your people are dealing with every day. We have these AI groups that are making requests for every business contract that we've entered into in the last 5 years and every line item for every payment. And they're going to every school district in the country. And it's all government data, and it all has to be gathered, and it all has to be turned over. And there's no way around it until someone changes something in some law saying we don't have to respond to AI. But I've talked to some legislators about that.
It is.
And it's not a bad one.
They know about it.
Did the person really request it if it wasn't a person?
We can't ask. In Wisconsin, we can't ask. We can't ask if it's a person. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Those kinds of things are just happening nonstop.
I don't love getting sucked into hypotheticals, but the last scenario that you just went through, you said that if this ended up going to an expulsion hearing, that board member would have to recuse themselves. You know, again, not to get sucked into hypotheticals, but who makes that decision? What if the board member says, I can remain unbiased? I don't care what I wrote before. I'm an elected position.
It might be up to your other board members to decide who, you know, like, was that a conflict or not? So to start with, at the beginning, it's you. You're responsible. And your responsibility is part of your fiduciary obligation to the board as a whole to ensure that you don't have that conflict. But if it goes down the line, could be courts, could be discipline.
A court, that could be, like, again, the expulsion situation, if somebody appealed the expulsion.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, where one of the things they're saying is this board member, one of the reasons why you should overturn this expulsion is because this board member had a conflict of interest. And so then DPI is potentially making that call, district courts potentially making that call depending on how far those types of things went. You know, or say that we were doing it, say it's a staff member. Staff member goes through they get terminated, they go through your grievance process, there's a hearing, you guys make that call, there's a wrongful termination lawsuit saying one of the reasons why that board member voted for that was because he thought I was a jerk or whatever.
And is there any personal liability within that board member if they decided to not recuse themselves, or does it fall back onto the district?
Ultimately, it could be, and that's one of the things we'll talk about here is kind of some of those propositions and when it could come back on you. Could be a crime, depending on how serious the conflict is.
Okay.
But in general, it's probably not going to come back on you personally unless it's a part of one of those like criminal types of situations.
You're going so far outside your...
Yeah, like you've got a contract, you have a purely financial interest in something that the board voted on.
Behind the scenes.
And yeah, so I mean, there you could really see kind of the crime aspect come into it probably more commonly, which, knock on wood, I've never actually had to deal with one of those. So
I view that as a direct sign of someone's integrity. I mean, why wouldn't you recuse yourself? What do you got to lose by just doing that? If you are in the middle of something, just recuse yourself.
Good. So kind of on this point, it is public policy in the state that a public officer in the discharge of their duties shall be absolutely free from any influence other than that which grows out of their obligations to the public. The general principle is that you really can't have two bosses. You can't serve two different people at the same time, where you've got an interest group over here and then your voters over here and the people of the district. And your obligation are to those people of the district. And so you can't have that type of conflict in your duties.
What about when our legal counsel is telling us something in conflict with what the people want?
We will talk about all of that at a different time. I am not going to comment on any of that in public.
Sorry, I shouldn't have.
But so the other thing that's really important too is even when there's not a legal conflict, there might be what's called the appearance of impropriety in a situation that it might make more sense for you to say it's not sound public policy for you to be on the board in that capacity or to have that type of discussion in that capacity. So you have these kind of true conflicts where you have a financial interest or you have some kind of, you're beholden to this other type of organization versus down to it might just be a situation where, like, for instance, in the student one that we talked about, where it's not necessarily a full conflict of interest, but it's a really bad idea. And it gives the appearance of impropriety, might lead to that type of appeal situation. You are prohibited, absolutely prohibited, from having a private interest in any public contract that you enter into. And so this would be, again, kind of from that idea that you can't have two bosses. It's to prevent any type of private financial interest in anything that happens here as a board. A violation of this in your private capacity, if you do these types of things, if you are, kind of going behind the scenes, trying to negotiate contracts, that type of thing, that can show that there was a private interest in a public contract. If in your public capacity you participate, but you have a direct financial interest, ultimately that would be the same thing where you have a private interest in a public contract. And so it mostly, when we're talking about these, we're mostly talking about money, that you have some kind of monetary outcome. We hired my wife's business to do this work at the school. I'm a part owner in a business that's trying to go to this school, to get a contract with this school. Things like, again, kind of from the idea of maybe this used to be a small town, there used to be a lot of things like this banker is also on the board, and can you have that bank as your, as your official bank? Or, what's the other one? Insurance. Insurance was another big one in the, early 40s and 50s, where there were a bunch of opinions from the Attorney General talking about exactly what level of interest is there that would create that kind of private interest. And generally, you have to have some kind of financial stake in the outcome. You get the business, you bring the business in the door, you get a percentage of it, you have a private interest in that. And so there are a couple of specific exceptions to it that are outlined in statute that kind of none really are worth all that much talking about, because they're pretty narrow, and they were kind of from that same era where it's like the same people are on the board as opposed to as the same people that run the newspaper and things like that. So it's I think inherent for me to just again kind of underline that we can't have any kind of interest in the outcome of a vote or a contract. Entering into that contract, the contract is void. It is not enforceable, which might set you up to, say you have a construction contract with your construction business, you have an interest in it, they are halfway through the work, the contract's void, they can walk away with the money they have right now, and they aren't obligated to do anything. So you might put the district in a really bad spot there. Also, and I mean, not to bury the lead, but a violation of the statute is punishable by a fine not to exceed $10,000 or imprisonment of 3 years. So it's also a crime. It's a strict liability statute as well. So you don't have to prove intent, which is that's pretty hard for you to defend yourself in that kind of a situation, because they don't have to prove intent. So again, if you don't remember anything else from this section, don't enter into contracts with yourself. Don't have the board enter into contracts with you. And this comes up, again, probably in smaller districts than this, where it's like, well, I want to sell property. And I want the board to, this is a great spot for a schoolhouse site. Maybe they should buy it from me. Ultimately, when those kinds of questions come to me, the question is, do you want to remain on the board, or do you want to enter into that contract? Because if you quit and you're not on the board anymore, you no longer have that inability to enter into that contract. So you sometimes might be in that choice where you say, am I going to stay on the board, or am I going to enter into this contract? Because you can't do both. We also get questions sometimes about, people who are serving in multiple kind of public officer roles. I'm both on the city council and the board. Those are considered inconsistent offices. So it doesn't come up very much, but just know that as well, that it might kind of, if you're thinking about getting into other kinds of politics, there might be inconsistent offices, and might be, which is kind of similar to the idea of having this conflict and not being able to take part in that action. Code of ethics for public employees and officials. You should be aware of this. There's a statute that talks about the code of ethics. Basically says that no local public official may use his or her public position to obtain financial gain or anything of substantial value for the private benefit of himself or herself or their immediate family, or for an organization with which he is associated. So this goes a little bit beyond. So this is the kind of code of ethics. It's a little higher than like the crimes over here. They're saying, going a little bit farther and saying, private benefit of himself, herself, immediate family, or an organization for which you're associated. And so this can be, the question I get the most is, what does that mean with association and an organization that I'm associated with? And essentially it means that any organization in which you are a director, officer, trustee, or if your immediate family is a director, officer, or trustee, or owns or has some kind of equity in the organization, or if the family member is an authorized representative or agent. So this would go to the idea of, well, we don't own the construction company, but we do have a 10% equity stake in it. Well, that would be a violation right there. Because it's not necessarily you that's getting the contract, but someone associated with you would be getting that contract. So it is the type of thing you have to be cautious about that as well. You should also know that nobody may offer or give any local public official, either directly or indirectly, and no local public official may solicit or accept from any person anything of value that could reasonably be expected to influence the local public official's vote, official actions or judgment, or could reasonably be considered as a reward for any official action or inaction on the part of public officials. So you can't be bribed. People can't pay you bribes. Can't pay you for your vote. They can't pay you for a non-vote. Those types of things. Anything of value includes money, property, favor, service, forbearance on a loan, or promise of future employment. It does not include compensation and expenses paid by the state, fees and expenses that are permitted and reported under the state, and those types of things as well. And it does not prohibit you, obviously, from engaging in outside employment. You can be paid at your job, but you cannot be paid for your votes here or for your actions or inactions here. And it also goes on to say that no local public official can directly or by the means of anybody else offer or promise to give or offer or promise to withhold vote or influence or promise to take or refrain from taking official action with respect to any proposed or pending matter upon a condition that anybody else refrain from making political contribution, provide or refrain from providing any service or other thing of value, or for the benefit of a candidate or political party, make any kind of communication that references that elective office. So again, it's this kind of idea that you cannot be trading your vote, you cannot be promising your vote, you cannot be engaging in vote swapping. All of those types of things would be outside of that and would violate that, your obligations under the Code of Ethics under the state statute. Yeah, and I think I talked about that one enough already. And let me just check here, because I know we've been talking for quite some time, and everybody's probably tired of listening to me talk. It's also, if you have concerns about this, if you're worried about, do I have a conflict? To the point of, like, what happens if I'm not sure? Anybody can request an advisory opinion from me, from corporate counsel for the organization, can request an ethics opinion. Where you are saying, I have this issue, I want an advisory opinion based on this statute saying what I can or can't do. And then that either goes to me, or if it's, if it's the type of thing that it's too hard for me to decide, I might kick it up to the state ethics committee, and they might be the ones to ultimately make that call. I would say this does happen from time to time, especially, frankly, it's especially on the kind of idea of inconsistent offices. When someone's thinking about running for other kind of office, they might want an ethics opinion saying, I'm good to run for office or to hold this office at the same time that I'm holding this office. That's probably where it comes up the most. But you should also be aware of the penalties. There are a bunch of penalties, like we talked about again, for violating these things. Ends the contract. You have a forfeiture. You have potential legal relief. Again, you can go to prison. It's a class 1 felony, so have to be really cautious about those things, and we have to take these kind of conflict of interest things really seriously. That's an awful lot. Any questions about what we talked about or any of the other kind of topics that we've been going through, people want to know about?
I can give you another perspective from probably 20 years ago. I had 4 sons, and my 2 older sons tend to get in trouble a little bit more than my younger ones. And
It's a really nice
one
way
of
to say that.
the short time I had been on here for a half a year or something, I got a call one day from one of the teachers and says, "Mr. Gardner, your son did this." And I said, "What are you calling me for?" I said, "Well, you're on the school board." And I said, "Do whatever you're going to do. Don't call me. Don't call me." What happened one other time again too. And so that's a perception, in kind of a reverse perception, where they somehow think that we have some, I don't know if they were scared or what it
That
was.
they're going to get in trouble.
That they were going to say, "Oh boy, and I said, he's going to get in more trouble at home than he possibly, definitely from what you're going to do." But that was one of those reverse things where
Yeah.
it kind of caught me off, it really caught me off guard. And I said, "What?" And,
Yep.
then I perceived what they were really asking me, you know, so, yeah.
Yeah, and I do think, I mean, that's a great example of expect the unexpected. I mean, I think that as a board member, you are going to get pulled into things that you are not expecting.
Yeah.
And that's why it's important to kind of come back to some of these fundamentals about what's my role, what's my responsibility, and that's the exact answer. You do what you're going to do.
Yeah.
Like, don't talk to me about it.
Please don't.
Totally.
Yeah. And I didn't hear any more about my 2 younger sons never got in trouble, so.
They learn from the parents.
Yes.
Well, you scared that first person enough that no one ever, those kids never got in trouble.
Yeah, I don't know what happened.
I do think going back to the transparency thing, we should put it on the agenda, talking about live streaming.
Yeah, I've got a couple notes here.
Okay.
All right, there's no more questions for Trevor. You want to take like 5 minutes before we go to close? And then we'll come back here.
Sounds good.